Hi guys, I'm Original Book Nerd, and tonight I'm with Amarah Calderini, and we are going to be talking about all the things the Dark World Trilogy. Book 1, Book 2, and for those of you who stuck around through this angst-filled, tension-filled, enemies to lovers, we will get into Book 3. And I know Amarah has been on my channel before, so we're going to deep dive in part 1. And then part 2 next week will be all the spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, finish book 3 before you tune into part 2
Read
because
it.
we will be going off the deep. But Amarah, how are you doing today? Are you excited to revisit this Dark World trilogy?
So excited because I'm just now almost finishing my second series, and I've just been thinking a lot about my first one and I miss it. I love going back.
So, for those of you either newer to her or maybe you started with her second series, which is like a dark twist on Peter Pan and that whole Neverland vibe, the Dark Road trilogy is more, I would say, what, dystopian with a twist of magic where the main female character learns she's magical later on. She does not come in knowing. When you set out to write this story, how did you go about finding the inspiration for Mirren and Shaw?
It was kind of a journey to find the inspiration because I really started writing it with the idea of it being just totally dystopian without magic. It started with just like kind of the idea of freedom versus like safety and kind of pitting those things against each other and exploring the contrast between them. And then as I was writing, I realized like the world was so much bigger than I thought it was. And that's how when the magic came in, and I loved combining dystopian and fantasy. Mostly because I don't feel like I've read it very much, and it felt fresh, like a fresh take on it and a way to explore both of those things a little bit differently.
So for book 1, like I prefaced, Mirren doesn't realize she has these magical powers. Was it fun for you writing a character that is essentially thrown off the deep end and finds herself, excuse my language, like essentially a captive of Shaw and his friend who are on the opposite side of the tracks where Mirren is from?
It was so fun, mostly because I feel like Mirren was raised in a world where she's not supposed to be strong and she's not supposed to be, um, I guess she's supposed to be palatable at all times. And she's thrown into this world where, in order to survive, you can't be any of those things. So it's kind of like a fun way of just like forcing her to embrace parts of herself that she had been forced to suppress for her entire life. So, and like the dichotomy between her and Shaw, who is raised in a place where you have to be savage to like exist. And I mean, exploring her because she is very naive in the beginning, and trying to do that in a way where she's not super unlikable, where you're not just like, was also a challenge. But I think I did it pretty well.
So predominantly in book 1, my memory serves me, it's from Mirren's point of view. We get here and there bits from Shaw's point of view. So we don't really see what's working inside his mind when he meets this. I mean, she's naive, but she's quite vicious, really. She's quite vicious at times because
She
she
is.
doesn't want to be taken to wherever
Mm-mm.
these strangers are trying to carry her.
Mhm.
That dichotomy within Mirren herself, hard for you to balance with, she doesn't know what she's getting into, but she she doesn't want to be a captive.
I think it's really fun, actually, just because I feel like she always had that viciousness in her, and getting to like actually let it out, and it comes out in like different, and I don't always think it comes out in like the most like the healthiest of ways because she doesn't know how to handle any of it, but like I feel like she was letting more and more of it out as the series went on. And Shaw, I think that's the great thing about them together. Like even in the beginning, he always pushes her further than she would ever push herself. So he was always pushing her, and that those things were coming out. And she's like, this might be the person that I am too. I just never got a chance to explore it where I was living.
For book 1, this might lead into a book 2 question,
Okay.
but you mentioned how Shaw likes to push Mirren. On the opposite end of that, Mirren also pushes Shaw in her own way.
Mhm.
Did you enjoy that element of almost how she brings his humanity back? And that's where it might tie into book two a little too.
Mhm. I feel like yes, obviously in book two, like the humanity part's like a big part, but even in book one, I do feel like she did push him to start reassessing some of the very hard stances that his trauma basically has ingrained into him. So she pushed him, I think, in a different way, but in a just as hard, like, I think, to open up and be vulnerable and realize, that you don't have to do everything on your own. So I think like her being an emotional person is what pushed him. Is like, now I have all these emotions and she is like very open with them. So I think that was his biggest like breaking point with her. I feel like that was his biggest breaking point is, just having to face a lot of the emotions that he had repressed before. And he, had to be so hard to survive. So now learning to be a little bit soft was like a very big, uncomfortable thing for him.
And with Shaw on the side of him and his crew, book one, we see one side of his best friends. And they
Uh-huh.
continue to develop throughout the series.
Uh-huh.
And I'm sure in part two, we're going to talk about some spoilers for his friends. There's still some questions I have after finishing book three.
That's very
But
fair.
let's the balance aspect of having them kind of soften towards Mirren, but not give enough away to really show us who they are in book one. How did you balance that with, you know, he can't be all that bad if he has these people who are so loyal to him. And they're
Uh-huh.
not loyal out of fear. They're loyal because they like, they like Shaw.
Uh-huh.
And they really don't like his father.
Yeah, I think it was, we always talk about like slow burn in romance, but I think it was a little bit of slow burn like in Found Family of revealing little bits of their backstory together and what tied them so deep. Like, and I think a lot of it comes from you get a lot of the first impression from Mirren's perspective, and she assumes it's out of fear, and she assumes a lot of things that aren't true. And then as she slowly learns more about Shaw, she learns more about their backstory and that it's not out of fear, but out of love that is what bound these people together. And I think that's a big learning point for Mirren, too, of like, she comes from a place where that's not really a thing. And watching, someone who is as brutal as Shaw have tender relationships, I think makes her second guess a lot of the things that she just assumed about emotions and relationships before.
And she's also kind of still harboring that hurt because we do know in book one, her brother is someone she leaned on. And
Uh-huh.
he more or less was like, you gotta stop this. Like, it's not okay. And then XYZ ends up in the woods, going on this journey through book one. How did you develop that relationship? Because there will be questions when we hit book three about Mirren's brother that I want to ask. But I'm curious, like, if that was always how you knew it was going to happen between them to kind of set her off on this journey where she finds herself and her magic.
I feel like I always knew how their relationship was going to progress because I think their relationship's, a little bit complicated, just how family is complicated because it's ingrained in you to love these people and you know that they love you back, but they're like in Easton's case, even in like the very first couple chapters, he wants Mirren to be less than what she is. He wants her to conform and she doesn't know if she can do that. And I think her journey with Easton is learning that even if somebody that you like your family doesn't accept certain things about you, that might not be the true love in your life. It could be other people that are accepting everything of you. So that's really kind of what it came from was exploring that sibling relationship of just feeling, I guess any family member, thinking blood is more important than everything else and then not feeling accepted by that blood.
And I'm going to skip a little bit of ahead, but going into the maybe second half of book two into the third book, Easton does come back with a multitude of other characters that I'll have questions for in the spoilers, how was he perceived by you, but also by the readers when you started having him express his opinions now on page, where he's not all the time supportive of her still, but he is also starting to learn as much as he revolts against the truth that that mind's been ripped away from him now.
Yes. I think Easton, especially because he didn't have a point of view, but I do feel like he was such an interesting character just because he's not all bad. He thinks that he's good, but he's been raised in this society and it's cost him a lot following those things that he's been raised to think. And I think like deconstructing what he's been taught is a pretty relatable experience for a lot of us of like what you were taught as a child and then you come through something painful growing and realizing, hey, that's not right and that's not what we should be thinking. I do think Mirren loved him enough to give him the space to do that and then to let him come back to her. And I think that's kind of a testament to Mirren because I don't know that we all have that same strength to, let somebody mess up and hurt us that many times and then to come back. But I do think his journey was an interesting one just because of how much it takes certain people a lot to learn things. Like it took him losing a lot of things to like, okay, maybe this is not worth it.
And he, like you said, he was essentially brainwashed. And it's interesting how when you compare them, Mirren grew up in that same society, but she was always like, why do I have to be like this? Like, why do I have to be okay? Like with them, taking away my rights, telling me who I'm going to have to be with, how I'm going to have to live. And Easton kind of, has the same trajectory with they control things, but as a man, he's not being told he can't be a certain way. So to him, he's like, but it's not that bad,
Yeah.
but
I feel like he's definitely the one in the society that benefits more from it. And that definitely, I would say, affects how he views it compared to Mirren. Like everything has come easily to him in that society where it doesn't come easily to her. And he has a hard time, especially in the beginning, seeing it, and even in book 2, like seeing it from her perspective.
So on the last topic of Easton, this has been something I've seen circulated around, but will Easton ever get anything like a novella, a book, a bonus chapter,
I do
something?
think that I will probably write a bonus chapter, probably like of what was happening before Tide of Darkness began, without any spoilers, just because I think it'd be fun to write from his perspective because I never have. And I mean, I know a lot about him. I just never have like gotten into his head that like as like the first person. So I think it would be fun to write a bonus chapter.
For the other side characters, did you have a favorite side character, or maybe you had different ones throughout the whole book, but was there one that every time you included them, you just, cackled to yourself like, everyone's gonna just love this, or they're gonna really hate that I added this in here?
It's hard for me to choose between Calloway and Avidus. I knew with some of my choices with Avidus, I was going to make some people mad. But Avidus, we can talk more about that in the spoilers. Him and Calloway are just like, they're both very opposite because Calloway is such a sweet character, but he's so funny. And then Avidus is just like, kills me.
That's not what we thought where this was going. So how did you balance it out for having enough for 3 books, but not giving it away at the beginning of book 1 to keep us on the edge?